Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there, welcome to episode 280 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Ingresso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. Hey, my guest on this episode is Elizabeth Cholawsky, Ph.D., and CEO at HG Insights. Elizabeth, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Hi, Bernie. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Well, I am excited to have you. I'm excited about the topic that we're going to discuss. This is a topic that I think is relevant in what I'll call normal times and probably even more relevant in challenging times. And so we're going to talk about having market intelligence so that organizations can thrive, but not just any market intelligence, Elizabeth, the right market intelligence. And you've got such a credible story to share with us. And I'm going to start with asking you to explain a little bit about your company, HG Insights, and then we'll go from there.
Great. I'm happy to do that. So let me tell you about HG Insights. We were founded in 2010 with a singular focus on building the best and the most objective intelligence about a company's technology landscape. So we were actually the first company to get that kind of information, not from smiling and dialing and calling up people and asking them what they're using, but from a big data approach. 10 years later now, we're the premier global leader in technology intelligence. Companies around the globe like Microsoft, Citrix, NetApps, Oracle, and many more use our insights to accelerate their sales, their marketing, and their strategy. But our vision really is to be the insights provided by our company will be non-negotiable and essential for every single decision that's made in a B2B technology company. So a little background on how we do that, right? So we mine this vast corpus of information. So we start with over 20 billion documents at the beginning of the month. And we use those documents to understand the technology profiles of millions of companies worldwide. We can then tell you about their technology stack, both the companies and its subsidiaries, their IT spend for various categories, and technology contracts for many companies. But we don't stop there. We go into the insights, and we'll be talking about that today and regarding how the technology intelligence is used for market analysis. But we can show trending, what technologies are waxing and waning, technology maturity, looking at the most forward-looking companies, and so much more. So we're proud to have helped a lot of companies so far with what we have, but we've got big plans for helping everyone with even more insightful information about the technology landscape.
That's impressive. 10-year-old company, you've accomplished a lot in 10 years. And Elizabeth, you have an interesting background. When we first planned this podcast, this is the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. You are the CEO of a company. You've got a really interesting background that really interested me in having you on and showcasing your experience, your expertise, and then on this topic as we get into it. So if you would you share with my listener sort of a synopsis of your career journey and your marketing experience that kind of got you to the CEO role? And then that'll give us great context to kind of dive into this topic of having the right market intelligence.
Sure. Yeah. So from the very beginning, I've always been really interested in using objective information to make better decisions. So my PhD was in political science, international relations, and econometrics. And what was I doing with that? I was trying to take statistical models and really look at conflict analysis and other social science phenomena, and allow people to make better decisions and hopefully have fewer conflicts based on the data. So from the very start, that was of real interest to me. So as I grew my career in the technology world, you can see off and on. I've had positions of VP of marketing and always with product development. And what drew me to that aspect of a company from the get go is that I really felt like it was an area that could hugely benefit from applications of data and objective fact-based decision making to do much better with the problems that they were trying to grapple with. So fast forward now to a couple of years ago when I started learning more and more about HG. It was HG data at the time. And I saw everything coming together with the assets that the company had that could be really powerful for some of the things that I've tried to do over and over again in my career to make companies more relevant, more profitable, to grow them more. And 2 years plus into it at HG, I think that we're really accelerating our ability to do that, particularly, as you said, in the current environment when everyone really needs to be more agile and base their decisions on what's actually going on rather than what they did a year ago. Because what they did a year ago, the
No
world
kidding.
changed, and we all
Yeah,
know that.
exactly. Yeah, what's changed? Everything.
Everything, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and so when you talk about market intelligence, what comes to my mind, and perhaps to the mind of my listener who's in marketing, is there's a lot of market intelligence already out there, right? There's reports you can buy, and there's subscriptions you can subscribe to, and that sort of thing. But in your world, you look at it much differently. So why don't you kind of lead us down that path? What do you where do you start when you're thinking about this topic of having the right market intelligence?
Right. So as you said, there is a vast array of different types of market intel reports that you could get. And I look at that; they'll always be needed, always be relevant. All the Gartners and the IDCs that we know of, but they're very general and often not actionable for a company. So what we've done is with the assets that we have of the technology profiles, IT spend, and other things, we've been able to take a different look at the market intelligence from a technology perspective and have been able to frame that up so that you can get your traditional total addressable market and your served addressable market, but drill all the way down to what's obtainable. And how do we do that? We do that because we can give a market landscape like a regional view of ERP products. But then because we're all based on data, we can take that and make sure that we can do it at the regional level, at the sub-region level, and then drill down all the way to the companies that are using the products that comprise that market. So what happens is you get the ability to analyze markets on demand. You get it fact-driven. So, a lot of traditional market intelligence is based on subjective interviews with CIOs and other people at various companies. You get it fact-driven on demand, and you get it really actionable, and that's at the core what's quite important with how we go into providing market intelligence versus a lot of the traditional methods. Does that
Okay. Yeah, and so I know that you're big on strategic planning. So why don't you touch on that as it relates to this topic of having a real strong handle on market intelligence? What's the role of strategic planning?
yeah, I look at what a company needs to do, and having the right strategic plan in place guides everything and solves so many different problems. So what do I mean by that? Um, let's take an example. Let's take an example of territory analysis and how do you go about that as a strategy for a company. So right now. Most companies, I would bet, are just doing it by dividing up the geographic boundaries and assigning reps to various boundaries. That's I think that's a fairly crude way of doing it compared to what you can do. So, with the kind of market intelligence we have, you can actually, for the products that you're selling, understand where the biggest opportunities are. Maybe you're slicing and dicing versus on white space or competitive penetration or lack thereof. So you can get down to territories based on the analysis of the technologies that we have, as well as the spend information. And what's the payoff on that? The payoff is that instead of just having, a blunt stick to start pointing your salespeople to, you've got a very precise analysis. If you know that Europe is a great market for you, and you just assign somebody Europe, they might not know whether they should attack Germany or France, right? So,
Hmm.
so with how we do it, you can continue to get granular at the level that you need. So, and then, as I said, you understand which companies are tied to that region, which most of the traditional market intelligence just can't do. They're basically contractually prevented from doing something like that. But the fun thing to me is that if you do it right, and you've got market intelligence and, in this example, territory analysis, it solves one of the biggest headaches I have, and that's alignment of marketing and sales at a company.
Hmm.
Because both a territory planned the way I just described is, you can hand that to the marketers, and they can use that easily to understand where to put their marketing spend, and what type of companies are in that profile. And you can hand it to the sales guys to know which companies to go after. So by
Hmm.
virtue of the fact that you're both working from the same piece of data, that traditional chasm between sales and marketing is greatly mitigated, if not goes away.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's data based and it's based on actual technology contracts. And as you said, when you were explaining what HG Insights does, it's not people smiling and dialing, but you're actually analyzing, what was it, 2 billion, 10 billion, 20 billion,
20
20 billion
billion.
documents at the beginning of every month. So
Exactly.
that's just amazing. And you also mentioned, Elizabeth, that you need to know not just your total available market, but you've got another acronym which I had never heard of before, the SOM acronym. You want to explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's the obtainable market. So even, traditionally we've done the total available market, and then the served addressable market. So who you think's out there. But when we talk about the obtainable market, what we're doing there is actually pulling out the companies that are going to be good targets or potential prospects,
Hmm.
likely buyers. Let me give you an example. So if you're looking at a territory, and this is what we can tell you with our technology information, you look at the territory, and 90% of the companies have embedded a competitive product, and they just bought that product a year ago. So we can tell you all that. That's not going to be very attainable for you, because most companies with major technology purchases, they're going to keep that for 2 or 3 or 4 years likely, before they go through some sort of reevaluation cycle. So we, with our SOM, so the obtainable market, will help you to be able to put that kind of territory aside and focus on the ones that it might be just the mirror image of that. It's penetrated by a competitor, but those competitors have been there for 4 or 5 years. That gets into the maturity of technology, and might be a really good prospect for you to go after. But getting to that obtainable prospect, as opposed to just, again, a general blunt tool, is what we can do by giving you information that allows you to be really precise with your sales and
Okay.
marketing.
So what are you seeing companies doing with this data, this market intelligence in current times? We're living in challenging times. So how are companies applying this data in 2020?
Yeah, so that's a whole different topic, kind of what's going on now with the COVID environment and how companies are responding. And one thing that we've seen is that companies are all having to rethink what they did at the beginning of the year. So,
Hmm.
no longer, and I think this is going to hold true even as we get out of this pandemic stage, and sooner rather than later, we all hope. But I
Hmm.
think it's going to hold true that companies no longer think of planning as a once and done activity. So what we're seeing our companies and our customers doing is that they're reevaluating the territories, or reevaluating their ICP, their ideal customer profile. We actually put out a study fairly recently on looking at the cloud maturity of various companies and where the spend was going. So when everybody went to a work from home environment, we what we saw was that the companies that were lagging in cloud maturity started having to put and wanting to put a lot more money into upgrading their cloud infrastructure and their cloud products.
Hmm.
So our customers were taking that information and taking the companies that were now shifting to a cloud first strategy, and using that to change their ideal customer profile because they wanted to target them in the moment when they were shifting budgets over to applicable areas for a good match with our customers that are cloud first and selling cloud technologies. So that's one sort of general example. I'll give you a specific example from a customer that we have called Rubric. Rubric has taken what we've done with our assets to both identify the markets, and luckily for Rubric, they've got a really big, close to $40 billion market, but they use that to they define that by looking at the information that we've got around spend for their type of products. But then they drilled down on that market and they created very equitable and profitable sales territories for their sales teams. So they used it to do the kind of detailed analysis that I was explaining earlier. But now, since they've got HG Insights side by side with them, they can make a look at what they did at the beginning of the year for the planning, reassess it given the new dynamics that are emerging, like cloud maturity and spend getting shifted, and change those territories on the fly. Very, very hard with anything else to do that. If you think of just using firmographics to to do territory planning, it doesn't help you when
Right.
changes in the air forever, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
So you've explained how sales leadership can use the granularity of the tech intelligence to do territory alignment and that sort of thing. You've also explained how sales and marketing teams can use this to be better aligned. What about product teams? What's the impact on product teams and how they can really leverage the market intelligence that's available at this level?
Yeah, so a lot of we were talking about my background earlier. A lot of my background is in product. I started very early on as a product manager, and I would have given a lot of my bonus money to have a tool like HD Insights to help me make better product decisions. And why is that? So you're bringing out a new product or even a new feature, and that new feature is going to be applicable to something very specific, like an informed sales conversation, and you can take what we've got and look at our own ICP, our own ideal customer profile, and then just size out the number of companies that are in there that have, say, enterprise salespeople that would be applicable and fit the persona of that feature. And then I could have used that to do an ROI justification of that feature development. That's like gold to product managers because you live and die by whether you're right by your decisions around products and
Yeah.
function. And it's so hard to get in a product situation data driven information to develop ROI on your specific costs.
Yeah, I know what you mean about we can all reflect back on our careers on tools that we have or technology that we have or data that we have at our fingertips today that we only wish we had, 10, 20, or more years ago in our careers. And that's a great example of that. You mentioned rubric. We're getting close to the summary here. Why don't you share perhaps one other client example and something that they're doing that's really interesting and maybe a little bit different than what rubric is doing and using the market intelligence data?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's talk about Citrix because they have really used what we have extensively throughout their sales and marketing operations. So they started with using HD Insights information to develop a propensity to buy model. So this was at the core of them profiling their best customers to find out what were the elements what were the characteristics in those best customers that made them the ones that converted to sales versus others. So that was at the very base of what they did. And that's all well and good and would have driven some great decisions. But they went several steps further and then applied that in terms of developing pipeline for their sales teams. So they ended up using it to reassess what their pipeline should be. And they came up with an $80 million pipeline. And based on what HG Insights information said they should go after. And what they found after testing was that pipeline converted the opportunities to leads quadruple the amount than the traditional methods. Um,
Hmm.
but they didn't stop there. So they've got the pipeline, and they now are using Citrix is now using it with really good results to drive opportunities to leads to conversions. But they've also put our data, our insights into the hands of the salespeople. So
Hmm.
if a salesperson, so often with models and a lot of the customer data platforms, the sales guy will be handed a fait accompli. Here, go after, go after, go after Cisco, and that's going to be your best prospect. Why Citrix put the information directly in the hands of the sales guy is that they can now take a look at the individual parts, the individual characteristics of that company that made them an ideal customer profile. So the
Hmm.
sales guy now has access to the HD Insights platform. They can, at a click of a button, see the whole profile and technology landscape of the prospect they've been assigned. And they can also take a look at it to know what kind of spend is available in there. So, you don't want the salespeople to be spending a lot of time developing the propensity to buy model and doing the pipeline, but it's invaluable to them when they can tie it all together and get that detailed information and get the why for why they're going to pick up the phone and talk to that company in particular.
So if I'm in sales, I want to sell at Citrix because looks like sounds like they've got a model there that really works and increases their chance of success. That's an impressive story, Elizabeth. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, they're doing great. Very proud of
All
them.
right. So what I want to do now is I want to segue to the part of the episode where I do a recap of our conversation, and then I'll ask you to elaborate on anything or maybe fill in any holes, and then we'll ask you for your digital contact information, Elizabeth, and then we'll bring the episode to a wrap.
Great.
So we began our conversation with an introduction to your company, HG Insights, 10-year-old company founded in 2010. That's really all about harnessing big data. You've become the global leader in the tech landscape that provides the company's technology landscape that is available for other companies who need to market and sell into those target companies, and really provide insights that enables decisions. And you're doing that by impressively mining 20 billion documents every month. And these are publicly available documents, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And that enables you to know the stack, the IT spend, contracts, trends, etc. That really provides valuable information on the technology landscape. We spoke a little bit about your very interesting career journey. You mentioned you've got a PhD in political science and economic, I can't even pronounce it, econometrics,
Econometrics.
and how you really were interested in that educational path to take you down the career path around harnessing data for better decision making, and that took you through many different roles, including VPs of marketing and heads of product development, and eventually CEO at two companies, including CEO of HG Insights, which you joined, I think, a couple of years ago when they were HG Data, and you really recognized the accelerated potential for the company, which has become a reality under your leadership. We talked about the importance of strategic planning and how it has many potential benefits to a company. And you use the example of in current times, determining sales territories and aligning marketing and sales, and really just making the right decisions for your business so that they're not low risk decisions. I mean, they're not high risk decisions, but they're low risk decisions because they're based on the right planning with the right data. And of course, we talked about how there's access to reports in the marketplace, but in most cases, they're providing very high level information and just not in depth detail like the kind of detail that's available through the market intelligence that you're providing through this big data approach. And so this technology intelligence really allows companies to do things like identify their total available market and also their serviceable available market, but more importantly, and I love this one, Elizabeth, the serviceable obtainable market. And I'm going to put that in Bernie's terminology, and I'm going to say that that's kind of like the reality check, right? Like what you can obtain by having the intelligence, the data that allows you to understand, for example, is a territory saturated with competitive products? If it is, then you know that that's not potentially a good territory to go after. And then we talked about how in current times, what you're seeing a lot of companies rethinking everything and really thinking, even rethinking their approach to strategic planning, that it's no longer something you just do once a year. They're doing things like reevaluating territories, reevaluating their ICP, and even reevaluating their offering based on what's that serviceable, obtainable market. And then you summarized really the use cases on how tech intelligence really lets companies make better decisions. You said it's, sales leaders can use it for things like territory alignment. Sales and marketing teams are able to align better together on campaigns and messaging. And then product teams can use it to make well-informed product decisions that are not bet your company product decisions, but really are well-informed, that really, again, minimize the risk associated with product decisions. You shared a couple of examples, customer examples, Rubric. I love that name. I don't know the company, but I love the name, and how they're using tech intelligence to identify their market. I think you said they've got about a $40 billion market for their cloud SaaS products. And by using tech intelligence, they're able to really identify what products the companies that they're selling into have installed, and so they know what to go after. And then the last example you shared was Citrix, and how they've developed this propensity to buy model. They're able to identify the customers that are most likely to buy, and they of course applied that information to build a pipeline for their sales team. And then in building that pipeline, they tested it. And you mentioned that they were able to generate, I'm going to call them SQLs, just to use marketing speak, that had 4 times the success rate, the conversion rate, than traditional SQLs. And as you said, there's more, as they say in infomercials. They put the insights into the hands of salespeople, really allowing salespeople to have access to the data themselves to understand what the characteristics are of the ICP within the accounts that they were calling on. So I'll leave my summary there. Is there anything, Elizabeth, that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very thorough summary. Just in closing, I'll say, I get so excited because what we provide allows the customers that we have to get access on demand whenever they want it. They don't have to wait for once a year refresh. It's data driven so that they know exactly what they're basing their decisions on. And this line of sight that you were very eloquent about to get down to the individual customers is very unique in the market, that you can go all the way from a general market view all the way down to the particular obtainable market that you need comprised of
Hmm.
companies. So did a great summary. I'm really excited to be at HG for all the reasons that we talked about, and hope that your listeners have taken a couple of tidbits about how to use data and why it's important in their marketing and sales efforts.
I'm sure they have. I know for me, I've taken a lot away, including I love the acronym SOM, serviceable, obtainable market. It's a tongue twister, but so meaningful. It's so impactful. I love that.
Yep, yep, I agree. I agree.
Elizabeth, where would you like to send my listener to connect with you online, just to connect and keep up with everything you've got going on at HG Insights?
Sure. On in LinkedIn, easily available at Elizabeth Cholawsky, Ph.D. If you're having trouble spelling the last name, you can go to our website, but it's Cholawsky. And then on Twitter, I'm at E Cholawsky. So ECHOLAWSKY.
Fantastic. And Elizabeth, my listener knows that both of those will be linked up at our show notes page that we publish with every episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. And that will be, of course, available at our website at vengresso.com. So, on that note, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me on this episode and just sharing all of these valuable insights, no pun intended. I've enjoyed the conversation, I've learned from it, and I know that my listener has as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bernie.
Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, I invite you to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player. We're available on all the popular podcast listening channels. And hey, I'd love it if you would give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. We publish a show notes page for every episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the interview. Just visit our podcast page at vengresso.com, and that's VENGRESO. And remember, just one S in Vengresso. Hey, while you're there, sign up to get the podcast delivered to your inbox each week. And be sure to check out the Modern Selling Podcast, hosted by our CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, I hope that you'll tune in again next week for another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.